All right, we are live. Hi there. My name is Jeremy Nichols, and I'm the Climate and Energy Program Director for WildEarth Guardians. And
Becca Fisher, Climate and Energy Program Attorney.
And we are here today on the steps of the federal courthouse in Denver. You can see above us here the building. We're in downtown Denver, and we're getting ready for a court hearing today that starts at 2 o'clock. I say hearing, but it's really what's called a status conference. It's a check-in with the federal judge, but it's a really important status conference today. It's the first time that we've been in front of the judge, and we're here at federal court because of a lawsuit that WildEarth Guardians filed against 7 oil and gas companies for violating our clean air laws. And we filed it last May. We filed it, and we have been briefing a motion to dismiss is what it's called. Industry's trying to get us booted out of court, and today we're not going to be talking about the motion to dismiss much, but we're going to be checking in with the judge and trying to impress upon him the importance of this case and the need for clean air justice in Colorado. But we wanted to take advantage of this status conference and being here at the federal courthouse to dive into what this lawsuit is all about and how it ties into our broader campaign to protect Colorado's clean air from the oil and gas industry. So what this case is about, we'll just dive into it here. And just as a disclaimer, we are outside in downtown Denver, so we may see or hear a few distractions. It could get exciting, but that's all a part of the Facebook Live experience. So, and thanks for joining us today too. If you're viewing, we do this every week on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. WildEarth Guardians Climate and Energy Program does a Facebook Live check-in. We try to dive into some of the latest issues or campaigns that we're working on and give folks a chance to interact with us, ask questions, and it just gives us a chance to share with you more details around the great work that we're doing to protect our climate from fossil fuels. So today we're at the federal courthouse. We have a status conference in this clean air enforcement case that we filed against 7 oil and gas companies, and the issue is actually pretty straightforward. The oil and gas industry here in Colorado routinely and chronically constructs, they drill, they frack, and they put their well sites into production for many months, sometimes even years, before they actually get their legally required clean air permits. A fundamental part of our clean air laws is that if you're gonna release air pollution, if you're gonna build a source of air pollution, you've got to get a permit, and the permit ensures that you're held accountable to strict emission limits, to monitoring requirements, reporting requirements. It's basically it's the contract that polluters make with the public that they're going to protect clean air and public health. But in this case, the oil and gas industry here in Colorado just refuses to get these permits before they start building these well sites and start polluting the air. And we discovered this issue earlier this year. We were tipped off to the fact that industry was doing this in Colorado, which it was shocking. You remember when you heard about that, Becca?
It was a crazy day. We were just like, what?
I know. We're like, that can't be. That can't be, because building a source of air pollution without
sources.
Huge sources, and building without a permit is like, I mean, that's like the most paramount sin you can commit under the Clean Air Act. Yeah, cardinal sin under the Clean Air Act. And so we were very surprised that this was happening. But we started digging into permit applications. Yep. And sure enough, all these facilities and every company, Extraction Oil and Gas, Noble Energy, Anadarko, all these big Colorado oil and gas producers routinely drilling and fracking these huge well sites, huge sources of air pollution, and waiting months, sometimes years before even just applying for air quality permits. So we, back in February, we put 7 companies on notice of our intent to sue them, and the 7 companies include Extraction Oil and Gas, Crestone Resources, Great Western operating, some of the more notorious polluters and more notorious oil and gas companies along the Colorado Front Range. But we also included Noble Energy, which is the biggest, I think the biggest producer in Colorado. And they're a lot of times labeled the, quote, good oil and gas company because they generally do more to reduce their emissions, but they are still lawbreakers, as we discovered. And so we put them on notice. But as we were digging more, we found out that there's this loophole in Colorado's set of air quality regulations that allows oil and gas companies to wait 90 days after they start producing to submit their permit applications. And this loophole, it exists, and it's really unfortunate. But what's happened is that companies have started to just grossly abuse exploit this loophole and abuse it. And they're not even, I mean, what's happening is that this loophole applies to the extent that you're not a large source of air pollution. Under the Clean Air Act, there's a term, it's called major source of air pollution. And a major source here in the Denver area is any source that emits, actually has the potential to emit more than 100 tons per year of ozone-forming emissions. And these ozone-forming emissions include volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides. And
results in asthma, children, the elderly, all of us are affected by it. So,
and as many along the Colorado Front Range know, this region is suffering from an immense ozone problem right now. And ozone is a key ingredient of smog, so we often refer to it as smog. And the region it's failing. It's failing to meet federal health standards limiting ground level ozone. And it's so bad that the EPA is actually planning to come in and sanction the state for failing to clean up the air. And they're going to declare that we are a, quote, serious non-attainment area, which, I mean, it kind of speaks to just how bad the problem is. I mean, this is serious, folks. And there are very serious health consequences for our high ozone levels. So we found out that oil and gas industry was building these major sources, these sources that have the potential to emit 100 tons per year or more of pollution.
Huge industrial sources.
Yeah.
So, and they exceed that limit by a lot, like thousands.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Tons coming out.
The potential to emit for some of these facilities, I mean, we're talking about huge fracking facilities with maybe dozens of wells on one site that have the potential to release thousands of tons of ozone-forming emissions every year. And so those major sources technically can't use that 90-day loophole to avoid submitting a permit application before they construct. So this loophole, it allows sources to wait to submit their permit applications for up to 90 days after they start producing, but it only applies to the extent that you're not a major source of air pollution. But industry has unfortunately interpreted the state air quality regulations to argue that basically there's a complete loophole. No matter what the size of the facility is, they can wait. They can construct, they can drill, they can frack, they can start producing oil and gas before they ever even submit a permit application.
Yeah, and this is a ridiculous loophole because industry, they're thinking that they're special and they can't calculate these emissions beforehand. But I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of wells that they've drilled in the past, and so they know this. Coal-fired power plants are required to calculate this before they started operating. So it's definitely doable, and it's an excuse at this point. They're not doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of a fundamental tenet of our clean air laws that you have to get a permit to pollute before you even start constructing, like before you even put a shovel in the ground. And the whole idea is you don't want huge sources of air pollution to be built and then have to come in after the fact and force companies to spend millions to deal with the air pollution. You want a clear sense of what the polluter is committing to and what the public is going to have to endure as far as the air pollution from a facility. So it's often called a pre-construction permitting requirement under the Clean Air Act, and industry has turned pre-construction permitting into a joke in Colorado, which is contrary to the law. And so we sued these 7 companies, and we are arguing that their interpretation of Colorado's air quality regulations is legally wrong, it's incorrect, and that they should be required to get the permits. They should have been required to get the permits before they constructed. But importantly, what major sources are supposed to get, they're supposed to get what are called major source permits. And major source permits are like the gold standard in air quality permitting. They ensure that facilities meet the most stringent emission limits possible, and that there are very strict assessments of how the air pollution from a facility impacts, like visibility and air quality in other ways. And it's a very rigorous permitting requirement. And industry doesn't like it because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of expense. And so you can just see how they purposely tried to avoid major source permitting through this crabbed interpretation of our clean air regulations here in Colorado, because it's all about their bottom line. They just don't want to spend the money to actually effectively deal with their air pollution.
Yeah, they don't want to spend the money to protect our public health. So it's not worth it to them.
Which, of course, and then you put it together that we have this ozone crisis, and it's like, well, we could be achieving greater emission reductions if they got their legally required major source permits. No wonder we're in the midst of an ozone crisis right now.
Which, by the way, the oil and gas industry is the largest source of ozone-forming pollutants in the Denver area. So it's, cars contribute for sure, but the oil and gas industry
Yeah, the state estimates that the oil and gas industry contributes 40% of all volatile organic compound emissions, which is more than any other source. Although we've seen other estimates, scientifically valid estimates, that put that much higher.
Yeah,
probably
2 to 3 times higher.
Yeah, 2 to 3 times higher. So huge source of air pollution, and then industry is doing everything possible to avoid these strict permitting requirements, and in essence, closing the door on opportunities to further reduce emissions. So as we're suffering here, and we are a serious non-attainment area, industry is completely flouting the law. So we don't like that. Here at WildEarth Guardians, we don't appreciate the fact that the oil and gas industry is violating the law and putting public health and clean air at risk. So we sued. And under the Clean Air Act, it's actually really cool. And Becca's done a little work on the Clean Air Act in the past too. Citizens, just normal people, represented by attorneys, can file suit directly against polluters. So in this case, the state isn't taking enforcement action. The feds, under Trump, certainly aren't taking enforcement action. But the law says that if that's the case, then citizens can still file suit. And so we filed suit to enforce the law, to get a judge to declare that they are breaking the law, and to assess penalties. And the penalties are actually pretty high. Under the Clean Air Act, they're almost $100,000 per day for violation. And so, we estimate that in total, the companies that we have sued face more than $1 billion just in civil penalty liabilities, which that just kind of, it speaks to how just the cost of what they're getting away with. Like, they should be paying millions, if not billions of dollars to deal with their air pollution, and yet they're putting that cost on our shoulders.
And we have to pay for it with our health costs and our inhalers. So
exactly,
it's crazy.
Exactly. So we filed suit, and we found 2 public interest attorneys to represent us. Great attorneys. Randy Weiner, who's in Boulder, Colorado, and Kate Merlin, who's also in Boulder, and we work very closely with them on a number of cases and a number of issues, and they have agreed to represent us and go toe-to-toe with these oil and gas companies, and we filed the case. And as often happens, what industry does is they try to get you thrown out right away, and so they filed what's called a motion to dismiss the case, arguing that our legal interpretation was wrong. They're trying to just get to the heart of the matter and try to get the judge to agree with them. And we responded, of course, saying no, that we think that you're incorrect. And they just filed their final brief, what's called a reply brief, yesterday in the case. I'll forward that to you. That to you. Yeah, I know Becca's excited to read it. And then today we have this status conference. And a status conference is like a check-in with a federal judge. It's not really a formal hearing, but it gives us a chance to have a conversation with the judge, to get a sense of, what issues are really sticking in his mind as significant here, and it also gives us a sense of, where the case is likely to go. Is he signaling that he does think that there are some real issues that need to be resolved through a trial here? Is he signaling that he agrees with us in some respects? He probably won't go that far today, but you never know. And it just gives us a chance to try to impress upon the judge the significance of this case. Becca and I are going to be here today with our attorneys, but we have been inviting our members and supporters and friends and allies to also show up. So there's probably going to be a bit of a crowd in the courtroom today, which is a great impression to make on the judge. We want him to understand that a lot of people care about this issue, a lot of people are impacted by this issue, and a lot of people want to see justice accomplished here. So we don't want this to seem like a one-off case that WildEarth Guardians filed to, somehow make money, but we don't make money on these cases. But we don't want the judge to think that. We want him to understand this is a public interest issue, and that we are representing the public, even though, Guardians has its own members and supporters, but we're trying to do the public interest here. The state's not doing it, the feds aren't doing it, so we're going to do it. And we're hopefully hoping for the best. Hopefully the judge won't dismiss our case. We'll weigh our next steps if that does happen. But it's actually kind of cool if the judge doesn't dismiss our case. It's a big deal, because it actually, because they're making legal arguments at the motion to dismiss stage, it will almost indicate whether or not we're correct from a legal standpoint, which if we are correct, then the case could be I mean, we could have the victory in hand. Not to get too presumptuous, but that's the way this case is has been set up. So it's really it'll be interesting today to see, and it'll be interesting to see how the judge comes down. Now, Becca, this case is a part of a broader campaign, what we're calling our Colorado Clean Air Campaign. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that campaign is and just some of what Guardians is doing to implement that campaign? Yeah,
of course. So Guardians has a very coordinated campaign across Colorado for Clean Air campaign. So we have a website. Check that out.
It's for cleanair.org. So co4cleanair.org. Go check it out.
Yeah, so check that out for more information. But we have kind of three legs of this campaign. I've been doing a lot of work ensuring that federal oil and gas permitting and any actions at that level are in compliance with the Clean Air Act, and that we're ramping down those permits. The Bureau of Land Management has been rapidly permitting what they can and ignoring the requirements of the Clean Air Act. So a similar issue where they are not considering the impacts that their new wells will have on Colorado's non-attainment
And this
status.
is the Trump administration. So it's the federal government that's actively undermining the state's clean air, Colorado's clean air.
Yep. So we're kind of working on all fronts there. So we're working on the federal side, keeping the Bureau of Land Management and the Trump administration in check. And then we also have tons of work that's going on the state side. So obviously this clean air enforcement case, and then we are going to be engaging here very soon in the Air Quality Control Commission's rulemaking. So that'll be dealing with permitting for oil and gas on the air quality side and ratcheting down those levels. And actually, we're seeing in the draft rules they're picking up some of our ideas, so we're a little bit hopeful that we can make some progress through this. We'll see how it plays out. The rulemaking hasn't officially commenced yet, but is scheduled to do so this month, and so that'll be a big piece. And as the draft rules stand, they're eliminating the 90-day loophole. Which is, if assuming that stays, it's a huge deal because it's kind of admitting that we're right. So,
and that's like one of our. It's a victory for our campaign. I mean, we called attention to this 90-day loophole. We are trying to enforce companies' abuse of this loophole, trying to change that, and in the meantime the state saw the writing on the wall, and they're moving to eliminate this 90-day loophole, which is great moving forward, but we still need to resolve the outstanding violations, right? And everything's still in draft form, so we're not gonna count our chickens before they hatch, but it's definitely a promising sign. But there's still plenty of improvement that needs to be happening too. The state seems to think that it can continue permitting hundreds of new wells each month. They're doing about 300 plus each month, I think. And so, there's hopefully better air controls that are going to come down the line, but that's not going to solve our problem. We need to be pausing the permits for now until the new regulations are in place, and eventually ratcheting down the number of wells that are being permitted, saying no to some of these, because our clean air can't handle it, our public health can't handle it, and neither can our climate. So. And that's, together with our partners, great partners at Colorado Rising, 350 Colorado, Mothers Out Front, and with other organizations, we've called on Colorado Governor Jared Polis to pause the permits, to take a time out on new fracking, so that we can get better air rules, better clean air safeguards in place, and assure that public health truly comes first, and clean air comes first here in Colorado. So far, the governor has not entertained our request, but we're going to keep it up. We know that we have to be persistent. Looking at some of the comments here. Thanks, everybody. We got to be persistent. We can't back down from this, because that's really what our Colorado Clean Air Campaign is all about. It's about setting the stage for a transition away from oil and gas, and helping to expose what we know, which is we actually can't continue to frack and have any chance of protecting our clean air. And what we're trying to get is to a point where the regulators acknowledge that and act on that, and come up with a plan to stop and then start winding down the footprint of the oil and gas industry here in Colorado.
That's essential.
And Becca's doing great work. we're doing the best we can. There's so much going on, and it's why we are working with such great partners as well, who are helping to lighten the load and helping to fill unique roles and responsibilities. So I mentioned Colorado Rising and 350 Colorado and Mothers Out Front, but other groups we're working with include Earthworks. They include the Sierra Club even, and Earth Justice. 350 Colorado for sure. And it's great. It's a great team effort, and I think that all of us are pretty committed to setting the stage for keeping fossil fuels in the ground. That's what this is all about. Right now, our aim is to, be a leading force in the development of new policies, new rules, to wield the legal axe as fiercely as possible to hold industry accountable, and to also build a movement. A big thing that we're trying to do is to build out some grassroots organizing capacity, and we're actually hiring an organizer right now. If you go to WildEarth Guardians website and go to About, and under the Careers tab, you'll see more information on that. So we're looking for somebody that can help us to help us to engage more people, help us to drive more turnout, and to help get more people on board with our Colorado Clean Air campaign. So if you are interested, please apply, and please spread the word if you know people who might be interested. This Colorado Clean Air campaign, it's about clean air, but it's about climate too, because you can't protect our climate and not protect clean air at the same time. This isn't just about methane emissions, it's about the full footprint of the oil and gas industry. And it's interesting, here in Colorado, there's a lot of talk about methane regulation, and methane regulation is certainly important, but when you actually crunch the numbers and look at the emissions, it's the downstream, or what we call end-use emissions, that really...
combustion emissions.
That really matter most. And the combustion emissions come from, refining, but also burning for transportation and for other purposes. And, when you consider that the vast majority of oil and gas produced in Colorado is actually piped out of state to be refined and to be burned, it makes me realize, oh my gosh, the imperative for keeping it in the ground here, for winding down production, I mean, it's tremendous.
Well, and it underscores the need for not only internal state climate goals that deal with direct emissions, but actual goals that recognize that we're shipping this climate crisis outside of our borders and allowing it to be burned. And we're ignoring that right now as a state, which I think is crazy, because Colorado should be a leader in this area. So
and we're trying to get Governor Polis to pay attention to those end-use emissions and to set goals. And it's hard politically, because those goals mean winding down the oil and gas industry and ultimately shutting it down, because we have to acknowledge the reality that we can't have fossil fuels and have any chance of confronting the climate crisis.
I mean, the science is clear. We have enough oil and gas and coal in development right now to exceed all our climate goals in terms of keeping us to 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. So it's insane. And that's just existing mines in development. This is not including all the new permitting and new development that we're allowing. So
it's crazy, but it's why we're really focused on clean air, because even though the governor is still coming around on acknowledging the need to keep it in the ground, he has acknowledged the need to protect our clean air, and he said some very bold statements.
He's set up to be our champion, for sure.
I mean, he said things like we have to move aggressively and boldly to address our clean air issues, that we need to put all the tools on the table to protect public health and rein in the region's ozone problem. And so we're going to him. We're saying, okay, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And oh, by the way, if you actually want to follow through with what you're saying, we have to start shutting things down. That's a reality. We can't. We've reached a carrying capacity, really, right? I mean, our air just can't handle any more oil and gas pollution. Well,
and oil and gas is the elephant in the room in Colorado. You cannot address climate and our clean air without addressing the emissions from the industry.
So here we are today. We're at the federal courthouse in downtown Denver. We're getting ready for our status conference in our clean air enforcement case, which we filed against 7 oil and gas companies. So the case is actually entitled WildEarth Guardians versus Extraction Oil and Gas et al. We're going after the big guys. We're going toe-to-toe with the industry and their toxic pollution. And hopefully we'll be able to set the stage for more effective clean air action and ultimately more effective climate action.
Stay tuned for more news in the coming months.
So we'll keep folks posted on how things go today. And in the meantime, thanks so much for joining us for our
Mm-hmm.
Facebook Live. I said, we do this every week, and we have a new topic every week, and sometimes even a new setting. So, here we are today on the steps of the federal courthearse in downtown Denver.
In the field.
Out in the field, yeah. And so we try to keep it interesting, exciting, and we heartily invite interaction and feedback from people. Next week, we're going to be checking in on our efforts to prevent the state of New Mexico from allowing toxic oil and gas wastewater to be dumped into the state's streams.
Huge issue. So
It's a huge issue.
definitely tune in.
Definitely tune in. There's a lot of stuff heating up around that. We're delivering the message to the New Mexico governor to don't force New Mexicans to drink frack water. That's our message. And
Yeah, they're wanting to allow it on crops, dump it into our streams. It's insane.
so this is
yeah.
very, very toxic wastewater that's produced.
Radioactive materials in it.
It's
so,
produced during fracking, and it's produced during the extraction of oil and gas. And industry doesn't want to dispose of it anymore. They want to be able to dump it into the state's rivers, into drinking water supplies, and onto crops. And we're saying, hell no, we're not going to let that happen. So we'll talk more about that next week. And in the meantime, follow us on social media. Our handles are at ClimateWest for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yep.
And then follow WildEarth Guardians as well. So we're the Climate Energy Program, but WildEarth Guardians is a much bigger organization that works on a lot of different issues. And all of our programs, whether it's the wildlife program, Wild Places, we're doing great work. And stay plugged in. So on Twitter, it's at WildEarth Guard. On Facebook, you're here, so I don't need to give you that address. You're watching right now. And then on Instagram, at WildEarth Guardians. So stay plugged in and stay tuned for more. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care.